Chapter 23, Returning to the Queendom aboard the Dawning, 338 solar year. He was running up and down the corridors looking for Captain Diego. Laszlo needed to get him to turn the ship around. The man was not on the bridge nor in his office. Their warrior had searched most of the ship. He was about to give up, when he remembered he had not yet looked in the mess hall yet. Sure enough, there was Diego enjoying several bottles of rum with a number of his men and swapping war stories. The black-bearded captain was in the middle of telling a story that Laszlo had heard variations of dozens of times, having spent most of his life on the high seas. The captain said, "A ship is sailing one day, a pirate ship appears on the horizon. The captain tells his first mate, 'Bring me my red shirt.' The first mate fetches the shirt and the captain successfully leads an attack on the pirates and defeats them. The next day, two pirate ships appear on the horizon. The captain tells his first mate, 'Bring me my red shirt.' The first mate fetches the shirt and the captain successfully leads an attack on the pirates and defeats them. Out of curiosity, the first mate finally asked the captain, 'Why do you wear a red shirt in battle?' The captain responded, 'Because if I am wounded, you will not see the blood and will continue to fight as if nothing is amiss.' The first mate and the crew were astounded at the bravery of the captain. The following day, 10 pirate ships appeared on the horizon. The men looked to the captain, waiting for the request that brought everyone so much strength. The captain looked at the horizon and said, 'Bring me my brown pants.' The room filled with laughter at the captain's classic retelling of the story. Laszlo walked up to the table where the captain and his men were celebrating their victory over the pirates. Diego, a bit intoxicated, spoke a little louder than he probably intended to. Well, if it isn't the hero of the hour. Master Laszlo, please come join us. Have a drink. Our victory would not have been possible if not for your bravery, quick thinking, and heroism." Laszlo lifted his hand and politely declined the invitation as he had many other things on his mind. Instead, the islander asked passionately, "May I please speak to you in private, Captain?" His ears suddenly perked up at the tone of desperation in this man's voice. He nodded his head. He stood up and directed Laszlo to his private office. Once inside, Diego said, "You probably saved my crew's life as well as my own. So, for that you have my thanks. Thus, I'll hear you out this once, but don't get in the habit of making personal requests of me whenever it suits you. See, it sends the wrong message to my men. Anyhow, what do you want?" He began a bit impetuously, "What would it take for you to turn this ship around and take us back to Felena?" Diego laughed for a moment before he realized the man was being serious and then added, "It's impossible." The rune bearer countered, "Please, we must. I have reason to believe that a member of the royal family's life is in danger. Plus, I think that Nagara might be getting ready to attack the Queendom. Please, we must go back." The captain's face fell downcast. "Sir Laszlo, it's not a matter of my desire, but simple math. Look, I haven't told the men, in fact only my first and second mates know. But we are low on rations right now. The pirates' cannon fire hit our cargo area. Lots of seawater flooded the room, destroying most of our food resources. Even with the extra rations we confiscated from the pirates' ship, it will be cutting it close just to get us to Obel." He went on, "Moreover, my lookout in the crow's nest spotted a storm moving in south of us back toward Felena, just before those pirates attacked us. If we tried turning back, even assuming we could find the right wind currents, my ship would surely get caught in the storm. And we can't afford to dump any more cargo. So, we're going to stay on course. Besides, I promised the princess I'd get you to Obel, and Captain Diego be a man of his word." The islander understood. He didn't like it, but he understood it. Had he been captain of this ship, he would have made the same choice too. Still, Laszlo cursed out loud in frustration. "I am sorry, son. If there was something I could do to help, I would. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to the mess hall. The more I keep them drinking, the less they'll be eating." The ship leader concluded. The bearer of the rune of punishment left the office and returned to his own cabin. He paced around the room trying to figure out what to do next. If he couldn't get to Falena in a conventional way, maybe he could get there magically. Maybe, Leknat. He thought. He spoke into the silence. Leknat, are you there? I need your help. Please, I need to get back to Falena. Can you teleport me there? Leknat. Sigh. I guess not, he thought. Teleport. That's what he needed right now, a teleporter to blink him to Falena. Where was Vicky when he needed her? He looked around his candlelit room half hoping she'd mysteriously and unexpectedly appear, but at last no such luck. It had been decades since he last saw her. She may not even be alive anymore, he thought. Suddenly, he froze still. Talking to himself again, he said, Vicky isn't the only person with a blinking rune. That elf, Aeolus, had one too. At that same time, he remembered the locket as well. Ren had given him a locket with a piece of magical mirror inside it that acted as a two-way communication device of sorts with the rest of the mirror, which was at Ren's home in Alcid. He reached into his bag of personal effects and pulled out the silver-chained locket. He placed the necklace over his head and then turned the metal casing over to look at the Elvish inscription on the back. He read the inscribed words aloud in Elvish, Ekphotalalas, which roughly translated in the words of men means, friend. Turning the locket back over, he opened it, revealing the oval mirror fragment inside. At first he only saw his own reflection, but soon it started to shimmer and glow a greenish-yellow color. An image appeared in the tiny fragment again, only now it was not Laszlo's reflected face, but rather it looked like a living room complete with couches and paintings on the wall behind them. Laszlo recognized it being one of the rooms in Ren's home. He began to call out, "Hello, is anyone there? Prince Ren, are you there? Lady Cathinel? Aeolus? Findus? Anyone?" After several more moments of silence, Laszlo was getting ready to give up when he heard strange voices like whispers begin to emerge from the locket. Suddenly, he heard what sounded like a door creak open and what sounded like children arguing with each other. One voice said, "You know we're not allowed in here without an adult. You're going to get us in trouble again." The other replied, "Look, I am telling you, I heard something in here. Don't be such a girl." "I am a girl. You idiot," protested the first voice. Laszlo laughed as he now recognized both the voices. He called out to them, "Terra, Oro, is that you?" "It's me, Laszlo." The elf children quickly came running over to the other side of the room where the mirror was facing at the sound of the familiar voice. Oro began, "Mr. Laszlo, what are you doing in my dad's mirror?" Terra rolled her eyes and added, "Duh, he's probably trying to contact your dad. That's what it is used for, talking to people. Really, do you ever listen to a thing your parents tried to teach you?" "Oh, and hi Mr. Laszlo, how are you?" Their warrior, wanting to skip the small talk with the kids, tried to move the conversation along. "I am doing well, dear, but are your parents home, Oro? Or maybe is Aeolus around? Dad is out hunting right now with Grandpa, but Mom is home. I'll go get her for you," answered the young elf prince. Before Laszlo could say anything else, the children had vanished from view in the mirror. However, moments later he could hear them re-entering the room, and this time they had someone with them. It was Ren's wife, Lady Cathinel. "Oh my, they were not fibbing to me. It is you, Master Laszlo. How can I be of service to you?" started the female elf in a gentle tone. "My lady," spoke Laszlo hurriedly, "I don't have the time to explain, but right now I am on a ship at sea heading back to my own nation. However, I need to return to the Queendom of Falena, immediately. Can you send Aeolus to get me? We owe you so much. You saved all our lives. My husband has sworn on a life oath to repay this debt. And if simple teleportation is all that is required to begin repaying it, so be it. I shall summon Aeolus and send him to fetch you." Turning her gaze to the children, she continued, "I believe he is at his father's smithy today. Oro, Terra, go get him for me and bring him here quickly, please." Happy to be entrusted with such an important mission, both were out the door in a flash to find Ren's trusted servant. "Thank you so much," a relieved Laszlo stated. Cathinel replied, "Sir Laszlo, it is no trouble at all. The children should return with Aeolus shortly. Why don't I contact you when he gets here?" He said, "All right then, let me know when he is ready to go." The twin sword master went to the desk in his room and pulled out a quill and piece of parchment. Why did it feel like he had been writing a lot of letters lately explaining his actions and reasons for having to leave a place so quickly rather than just doing so in person, he wondered. After he had finished writing the letter, he went down the hallway and slid the letter under the captain's office door. He figured Diego would find the letter in the morning explaining that he had found another way to return to Felena. Also, he had written a second sealed letter. He asked to be delivered to Chairwoman Flair once they deposited Hassan and his followers to the proper authorities. Lastly in the letter, Laszlo told Diego if he would do this favor for him, then he would consider them even. Since Diego, also, felt indebted to Laszlo for saving the Dawning and her crew in the previous battle. After covering his tracks in that department, Laszlo returned to his cabin waiting for the elves to call him back. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, he felt the necklace around his neck start to vibrate and pulsate a small noise. Laszlo lifted the piece of metal, clicked the locking mechanism and it opened up. There in the mirror fragment was the familiar bald head of Aeolus and the lovely Cathinel standing next to him. Again, the rune bearer explained to him the situation and what he needed the elf to do. However, Aeolus quickly displayed a look of concern on his face before he said, "That is not an easy thing you ask of me, Sir Laszlo. The distance might be too far. I've never teleported off the continent before and you're in the middle of the ocean to boot. Plus, I would need some kind of reference point. Having never seen the place where you are, I can't see it in my mind's eye. And that is the basis of teleportation magic." Laszlo felt his hopes being dashed once more. Then he asked, "What did the bald elf mean by reference point?" Aeolus explained that normally when one teleports, they need to be able to envision the place in their mind. But, because he is an elf, he doesn't necessarily have to see a place as so much as sense it. And being an elf, he is very sensitive to magical areas or enchanted locations. He explained. For example, the one time he teleported Laszlo to the East Palace. Though he had never been there or seen it before, he had sensed the Dawn Rune's great power from afar and got a rough idea of where Laszlo wanted to go. But that powerful rune was in the same country and only a few dozen miles away from Luna's. With this however, Laszlo was hundreds of miles away. He couldn't sense him at such a distance, could he? The old captain smiled. "So, basically you need to sense something very powerful in order to blink to where I am? Great. That I can do. Aeolus, turn all your magical focus and attention northward. Give me about 5 minutes and be ready to go once you sense me." Aeolus didn't fully understand what Laszlo was going to do, but he knew the human was a true rune bearer and he had seen with his own eyes what that meant. Laszlo gathered his belongings and quietly left for the top deck. He walked back to the stern of the ship knowing there would be no one there, because the captain had declared that area of the ship unsafe and off limits, since it had been so badly damaged in the battle with the pirates prior. He had assumed correctly, no one was there. At least for now. Laszlo took in a deep breath. He knew once he started this, he wouldn't have much time until he attracted a lot of unwanted attention from the crew. Lifting his left arm in the air, he started summoning a lot of power from the rune of punishment. The familiar glyph appeared over his head as dark red, green, and purple streams of light began to whirl around Laszlo's whole body. Soon arcs of crimson lightning began forming around his hand too. The former leader of the Federation Navy concentrated with all his mind and focus, as he directed all the runic energy upwards into the sky. The result was something like a beam of red and purple light that seemed to pierce the heavens. Even the clouds that had been in the sky began to roll back and got pushed apart by the forces of energy being generated in the sky. Soon the clouds had receded so much that all the stars for about a mile in diameter around the ship could be seen twinkling in the night sky behind the true rune's awesome power. This display of amazing magic had not been missed by the crew. Within moments, most of the crew had run up to the top deck and were paralyzed by fear and awe when they saw this cosmic light show and heard it as well. As this display of power was as loud as being right next to a waterfall. Mr. Oaks and several others could not believe what they were seeing as the many colors of light in the rear of this ship started to move about like a tornado around the silhouette of a man standing in the center of this magical storm of runic power. Diego and the rest of the crew arrived at the scene, but like the others they couldn't say a word, only watch on in amazement. Then, out of nowhere a new light formed near them. This light was a yellow sphere that lasted only a moment. But they could see that someone or something had appeared out of this yellow light. The figure had stood, likewise, in astonishment at this otherworldly display of tremendous power. Only he was not frozen by fear as they were, but rather he walked toward the ominous lights and even stepped inside them. He seemed to grab the man inside it and suddenly both vanished in a flash of new yellow light. With both figures gone, the light show started to diminish until there was nothing left but dozens of dumbfounded crewmen standing under a now starry night sky for miles as nearly all the clouds had been displaced. At last Mr. Oaks spoke up, "Captain, what in the name is of all that be holy, was that?" Diego mumbled, "I don't know, Mr. Oaks. But I do want you to go do something for me." "I?" asked a puzzled first mate. The captain answered, "Go fetch my brown pants if you would please be so kind." In Laszlo's next moment of awareness, he was standing in a forest with Iolis that he immediately recognized as the wooded boundary between Alcid and Lunas. A great smile came over the warrior's face. Iolis on the other hand seemed very drained and exhausted, since he had used up so much energy teleporting them across such a vast distance in such a short amount of time. He extended a hand to help the elf stand up straight, which his pointed ear friend accepted. The bold elf now spoke, "When you told me to focus my attention northward, I was expecting to feel your rune as one would hear a whisper across a room, faint, but noticeable. I didn't expect you to use so much power. Amazing. I wanted to make sure it would be a powerful enough reference point. So, I wasn't sure how big it had to be. Was it better than a whisper, then?" Laszlo asked curiously. The elf looked utterly perplexed. "You have no idea, do you? You humans are so strange. All that power, and yet, unfamiliar with it. No, what you did there was the magical reference point equivalent of yelling in someone's ear that was only a few feet away unexpectedly as loud as you possibly could without warning." "Ha ha ha," laughed Laszlo, "you don't say. Well, sorry if I made you temporarily magically deaf or whatever." Iolis added unamusingly, "Indeed, I would hope so." Laszlo's face now turned back to a serious expression as he asked, "I don't suppose you could teleport me to Sulfalena, or even East Palace, or someplace nearby like that?" Iolis looked at him for a moment wordlessly, then said, "In of my own strength, no, I could not. However, if you use your rune to recharge my blinking rune, I could probably manage it. I will take you to East Palace. I can walk home from there. Because, that's all my body will be able to handle. I'll be too weak after that to teleport back." The former Obel Prince hated to ask so much of him, but he knew that right now every moment seemed to matter. Maybe it was a premonition, or a vision from his rune, or just a gut feeling, but he knew that something heinous was going down tonight. He reached his left hand out to Iolis' right hand and shared a small amount of his rune's energy with him. The elf felt his magical forces being restored. The true rune's power, he felt, was overwhelming and he had to be very careful not to take too much or it could destroy the blinking rune or injure his already exhausted body. The elf stopped after only about 5 seconds of absorbing the runic energy. It was enough to do what needed to be done, he reasoned. Once more, he and Laszlo vanished into a yellow sphere of blinding light. They arrived at East Palace moments later near the small lake where he had appeared with the elf months prior. After saying goodbye to the only human he considered to be honorable, Iolis vanished into the night on foot for the short journey back to his own homeland. The twin sword master, meanwhile, had to travel by night to Solvalena. He was extremely grateful to the elves, for they had at least given him a fighting chance. He started running down the road for the capital city. The moon and stars were his only real light for seeing the road ahead of him. He whispered determinedly to himself while running at the fullest speed that the night sky would allow for, "Alinda, I will protect you. Even if I can't have you as my own, I will make sure nothing harms you. I am on my way." As the Dawning's crew was engaging with Hassan and his pirate cohorts, another fight was occurring back in Falena, and it wasn't going well. Robert the Reaper was about to die. His forces had met up with some troops investigating from Durat. Now numbering around 3,500 men, they felt more confident about engaging the advance force of this invading army. Robert's plan was simple enough: sneak behind enemy lines to engage this invading army in a skirmish to get a feel for how formidable these so-called undead forces truly were. He wanted to draw the enemy into a small canyon area near Port Spinax. This way his smaller numbers could engage them by bottlenecking their superior numbers into a smaller group. Normally, this would have been a sound tactical move that most generals would use. Indeed, the plan did work. These invaders took the bait and started to enter the canyon. 500 men had lured them into the valley area below. Meanwhile, Robert had placed about 1,500 men on each side of the high rock walls. Casting rune spells, shooting arrows, and even throwing rocks, those on the high ground began to attack the mid and rear forces, while the 500 on the ground engaged the foes on the front line. Everything was going well, or so it seemed. Thinking the enemy would soon give up advancing once they realized they had lost their numerical and tactical advantages, Robert ordered his men to keep pressing the attack. However, the enemy didn't stop, nor seem to care about Robert's successful ruse. Even though they had no tactical advantage and hundreds were dying by the moment, more and more kept entering the canyon. They climbed over the rocks and the bodies of their fallen fighters. Soon they began to scale the side of the rock walls. That's when Robert had noticed it, but he couldn't believe it. They really were undead. They felt no pain or fear. They cared only about one thing: killing. However, someone or something was directing them, because soon some of the zombies started walking around and up the canyon sides instead of going through the valley. They were getting overrun. Robert couldn't believe it. He called for a retreat. The men on the sides were starting to withdraw, but those on the ground were still fighting. They had nowhere to go. They had brought ropes with them in case of an emergency, and the men below needed to climb out. Robert was about to throw a rope over the side to save a few when he got blindsided. One of the zombies that had climbed the rock wall had grabbed Robert's foot and pulled him off the edge. He still had the rope in one hand and pulled out a knife in the other hand. He was hanging off the edge. The zombie that had pulled him down was still hanging on the side of the rock too. It reached out with one hand and had grabbed Robert by the throat and was now dangling him hundreds of feet in the air. Robert could feel its strong, but cold and slimy, hand clutched around his neck, squeezing the life out of him. He could even feel the smell of rotten flesh and death, so close was he to the unholy creature. The Queen's knight was about to pass out. Desperate, he took the knife and with all the strength left in his body he sliced the zombie's arm off. It felt no pain or yelled out in rage. Robert dropped his knife. Using both hands he grabbed the robe. He climbed back up while gasping for air. At the top, a few men had stayed to wait for him. He went to call out to them, but blacked out once on solid ground again. Several hours later, "No, curse it!" bellowed a clearly angry Robert. He had awakened in a bed in the commander of Durat's office. The officer was looking over a map of Falena. Robert came to his senses, recalling what had happened that morning. Also, by looking at the grim face of the military man, Robert quickly figured out what had happened once he had passed out. Taking his fist, Robert smashed the map of Falena with which the officer had been studying the recent troop locations of both sides in the war room. The commanding officer at the fortress of Durat dismissed the messenger with the latest news on this undead army. 500. 5 freaking 100 men. Sons. Husbands. Brothers. Are dead, because of me. My foolishness got them killed. I underestimated. Damn it. Lamented Robert. The officer tried to console the Queen's knight, but, you saved 3,000 men. This is war, Sir Robert, and men die. You know that. They weren't just sons and fathers. No, they were soldiers. Fallen soldiers. Brave and heroic warriors. Who died serving the Queen and this nation. Besides, now we know. We know what we are facing. Robert, more focused now, said, you're right, we do know now. Sadly, this knowledge came at a high price. But the rumors were true. Those things out there are not human. At least not anymore. We can't. I won't underestimate what those corpses are capable of again. The officer, seeing Robert was more reasonable and focused now, returned to debriefing him on the latest communique he received from Lord Alan. Sir, after you and the men went to face our foes in that brief skirmish in that valley, I sent out a few scouts to investigate what the situation is like at Port Spinax, figuring your marching would be a cover for their incognito. He continued, the enemy doesn't seem to be able to cross the river. Those soldiers were smart to have destroyed the bridge as they retreated. As the Fatuous River seems to have blocked their advancement. They don't seem to be able to cross the river or rebuild the bridge. They're stuck in the southwest part of the country, near that area surrounding the deep twilight forest. Moreover, the Dragon Horse cavalry is patrolling the Fatuous, watching for any new movements or river crossings. Robert interrupted, what about reinforcements? Another 1,500 from Rainwall and Distrise arrived while you were gone. Also, while you were still asleep, I sent word to his commandership and the Queen. After having his war meeting, he sent word to us about the upcoming battle plans. Oh, inquired the halberd master, what is his new plan then? Master Alan is heading to Lord Lake to get the hidden weapons caches that we kept secret from Nagaro at the end of the last war. Plus, those extra weapons that Lord Rovery confiscated from that criminal. From there, he'll be gathering troops from Sable and Lelkar as well as other towns in the southeast. Afterwards, they shall sail up the river to Durat. Godwin, apparently, will be bringing more troops down from the northwest and Stormfist. While the Dragon Horse forces sneak up from behind by crossing the river from the south. On the morning, 3 days from now, we shall all be ready to engage them in this tri-prong attack. Finished the Durat commander. The knight was impressed by Alan's tactics. That would mean they would have at least 10,000 to 12,000 troops ready to go in only 3 days' time. Remarkable, thought Robert, that will be more than enough. Earlier that same day, everyone was reading the report about Robert's battle from the Durat commander. 500 dead on the first day. This is unbelievable. How can all this be happening? Asked Syra in disbelief. Alan replied, sadly, I know that this is just the beginning. Also, it is just too improbable that Razi's escape and this undead army attacking at the same time is just coincidence. However, stopping this army takes precedent over all else right now. Rose spoke up, at least we now know who was behind all that grave robbing. Wait. So, does this mean we are at war again with Nagara? Alan, looking a bit contemplatively, was about to speak, but Godwin chimed in, I honestly don't think we are. My informants in Nagara just got word to me this morning. Apparently, they have declared martial law in most of their major cities. They seem to be on the brink of a civil war. I don't know what happened, but right now every major political faction seems to be vying for power. But, how did that happen? Asked Rose. It would seem that their little ruling council in their religious oligarchy has either been overthrown or, worse, eliminated. So, even if this undead army is the creation of someone in Nagara, there is no way to know of which faction it belongs to at this time. No one in that country is currently in control of anything. Godwin replied. Alan spoke up again, Marcus is right. We can't know who in that country is behind all this right now. But I suspect we will find out soon enough anyhow. since they want to attack us so badly. Here is the plan: the enemy can't seem to cross the Fatus River. So, with the main bridges burnt down or destroyed, they are trapped in the deep twilight forest areas. The Queen's husband added, also, it was difficult, but I finally got a message back from the dwarves. They said they will block off any tunnels in that area in case our undead friends decide they want to go cave exploring. Moreover, I'll be heading east to get our hidden weapons and more troops. Godwin, you go to Stormfist and arrange our forces there. I fear I've lost too much influence now in that town thanks to my traitorous nephew. You are still highly respected there. The nobles should not give you too much trouble. Godwin nodded his head yes to obey the order. The commander of the Queen's Knights looked at his wife and then to Rose. Rose, you will stay in the city. I can't just leave Solfalena totally unguarded. Besides, our patrols here will be low. But if the townsfolk see a Queen's Knight, they should feel safer and not panic. Plus, Elemark, Alinda, and the Sun Rune will still need to be protected. I understand, my lord, answered Rose in a serious tone. Do you want me to head to Durat to help Robert prepare? Asked his younger brother. No, Gress, I actually have another job for you, answered Alan suspiciously while making eye contact with his wife and then at his older daughter. Syra, this is why I asked you to join us today. Do you remember what you told me about the Twilight Rune when you wore it for your engagement ceremony? About how the rune felt so natural and how it chose you freely? Syra nodded yes and had a feeling she knew where her father was going with this. Sure enough, she was right. Aelin wanted Gress to escort her to West Palace and retrieve the Twilight Rune. This rune was very rare and powerful as it used sun-type magic to create awesome magical spells capable of great destruction. Besides holy and fire spells, sun-type magic was, also, quite effective against undead creatures, as any decent rune teacher in Falena could tell you. Moreover, Aelin wanted her to be his ace in the hole, his backup plan should the army not be enough to stop this invading force. Only members of the royal family could use the 3 solar runes. And they worked even more effectively when the rune got to choose its host. Since Syra met all these qualifications with the Rune of Twilight, the aging warrior poet knew she was his best shot. Not surprisingly, she agreed to help. Aelin assured her that she wouldn't be on the front lines, but would stay at Durat during the battle and only be called upon should the fighting make a turn for the worse. So, with everyone having their different missions, they all left the meeting room and made great haste to get to their respective destinations before the day was over.